Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanMuscle.com. Today we're taking a closer look at, listening to, and installing the Magnaflow Competition Cat-Back Exhaust, available for the 2018 and newer Mustang GTs without active exhaust. Full disclosure guys, if you do have an active exhaust equipped S550, this one's not going to be for you, but there are a ton of options in the category for you, including another Magnaflow competition SKU that you can check out on the site. Now if you want to check this out for your own Mustang, this is great for the guys looking for a really deep, throaty, aggressive tone, something that is very boomy inside the car. You want to hear the deep, throaty exhaust all throughout the RPM band. This is definitely going to be for you. I'm going to give this one about 3 out of 5 on our loudness meter. It's not super loud in volume, it's just really deep in tone. All throughout the RPM band, going from idle, you get a nice rumble. Throughout the lower portion of the RPM band, you get like that sweet spot around 2,000 to 2,500. People testify to that in the reviews if you check out the product page. And then once you hit wide open throttle, the thing really does bark, but it keeps that deep tone. It's really surprising the way Magnaflow does this system, considering it's the competition. It's almost a straight pipe. They definitely have a little bit of baffling going on inside the mufflers to deepen that tone, but otherwise you're basically getting a straight X pipe going all the way back to those really small mufflers in comparison to the stock ones. So deep, throaty tones is the key word for the video. Moving on from there, you'll notice that this kit does come in with 304 stainless steel head to toe, 3-inch mandrel bent tubing as well, so the larger diameter there is better for the airflow. You're also going to pick up a few horsepower and torque numbers with this kit. Now, of course, we're not dynoing it, but Magnaflow does let us know you can expect a small bump there. So of course you do have the X pipe instead of an H pipe and your factory resonator, which is going to help with the power bump. The whole kit comes in right over the $1,600 mark. That is putting it toward the top end of the spectrum as far as pricing for a non-active exhaust Mustang. Now, the install, I'm giving 2 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. Not because it's too difficult, but just because it requires just a little bit more mechanical knowledge than just a simple cold air intake or vinyl install. Now with that said, simple hand tools will get the job done. I'm going to take you through every step of the process. Let's get started. Tools used in this install include an impact gun or a ratchet, an extension, 13 and 15 millimeter deep sockets, flathead screwdriver, and a mallet. Now the first step of the uninstall here under our 2019 GT is to loosen up both of the band clamps holding your stock exhaust to the headers. Now what we're going to do is grab a 15 millimeter deep socket and loosen up the 2 bolts here and on the second one. Now we're not going to fully remove them, just get them loosened up so we'll be able to slide the rest of the exhaust out of place. Now the next step here is to go right under your cross member here, and we're going to remove the brackets holding our factory hangers to the frame. Now these are 13 millimeter bolts. You have the option of sliding the hangers out of these brackets, but I find it to be way easier to just grab an extension and my 13 millimeter deep socket and get these bolts removed. Go right on over the rear sway bar. Pull those bolts out. You want to keep these because we're going to have to reuse those once we install our next exhaust. Now with those bolts removed, these brackets are actually hooked on to this cross member. So we're going to lift up and just unhook them and just rotate it down out of the way. Same thing on both sides. With the clamps by your factory manifolds or your headers loosened up, we've got the frame disconnected from those brackets on the hangers. At this point, we're going to disconnect the stock exhaust from the headers, and I got my buddy Scott here to help me lower it down. If you're working on the ground on jack stands, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to do by yourself, but since we're so high up in the air, you're going to want to have a buddy with you if you're working on a lift. So once we get these disconnected, we're just going to slide the whole factory exhaust out of the hangers by the exhaust tips toward the front of the vehicle, then we'll be able to set it aside. On these clamps, there's a little bit of a tab holding this on, so you might need to grab a flathead and just peel up on that locking tab that holds it in position. So we got our factory exhaust off of my buddy Justin's 19 GT. It's on the ground next to our Magnaflow Competition. I want to take you through some of the similarities, but mainly the big differences between the two kits. We're going to start up front here with our factory exhaust. This here is the factory resonator. That, of course, is going to mute some of the sound, muffle that a little bit, reduce some of those higher frequencies, but it's also going to restrict a lot of airflow, which in turn can rob you of some horsepower and torque numbers you'd otherwise get with an aftermarket exhaust. Now this one here from Magnaflow is a beautifully welded X-pipe. It's pretty thick and chunky, more so than some of the other options in the category, but this middle section has a crossover pipe which basically allows the airflow to go through unrestricted, no kinks, no walls for it to hit. It's a very smooth motion, which means a faster exhaust gas gets to exit, which in turn can translate to horsepower and torque jumps. This is also going to result in a louder volume as well as a raspier tone. Typically when you have an aftermarket H-pipe, you get a more deep growl, while the X-pipes here are a bit more on the loud and raspy side. Now that's not the case for everyone. It all depends on the muffler system and if there's resonators included, so it's really a case-by-case basis, but on this particular option with the competition mufflers, I expect something a little bit louder and a little bit raspier. Moving on, entire system is a 3-inch diameter mandrel bent 304 stainless steel. High quality materials, highest quality in the category as a matter of fact. 304 is the best you can get. And keep that in mind when you're shopping around, depending on where you're located. If you're in a wintry weather area like we are here on the East Coast, then you're seeing a lot of road salt in those wintry months, which can take a toll on the underbody of your vehicle, specifically your exhaust materials. Now the factory exhaust is more susceptible to corrosion and rust than the new kits that are 304 stainless, so you can expect a big bump in durability and quality there. Moving on, you'll see mandrel bends, which means it's a little less kinked. It's definitely got smoother bends, allowing for a smoother airflow. Moving up here, we're looking at the mufflers. Now, big difference in size. The factory mufflers are real big and bulky. These ones are very small and compact. Those Magnaflow competition mufflers are race inspired, so they're essentially straight piped. So you get very little baffling, very little change to the tone, which is going to add to the volume, of course, and add to the raspiness and hollow sound that you get with this kind of muffler. And then it leads over to your tips. 4.5-inch dual tips on both sides. So you're retaining the quad tip look for the newer S550s. You're also getting a really attractive chrome tip. Now these aren't the mirror-like chrome, the bright, polished chrome that we're used to with a lot of the aftermarket exhausts. This is a little bit more dull, so it's a lot more reminiscent of the color that you'd see in your factory exhaust, which is very different. A lot of the options out there with chrome tips are really polished. Not gonna be the case here. It does have MF very subtly and almost like a frosted glass look embedded on the top there, which adds a nice little subtle texture and a nice little brand. I think they're really attractive tips. They're very different than aftermarket ones, so it's all personal preference, but it's worth noting. Also, it's worth noting, the weld plate between the two tips also has a cutout, the CNC cutout of the MF logo. I think that's a nice touch. Not really needed in the welding that they have there, but they're connecting for support, adding a nice bit of durability to it, structural support, and with the MF logo, I think it just adds a nice touch. All of that said, guys, we do have to transfer over the hanger brackets, and then we're gonna talk about installing your factory clamps. So let's get to it. Now, when you're transferring these over, it might be easier to use a hanger removal tool. Definitely recommend PB Blaster, WD-40, white lithium, whatever you have on deck to grease these up to get them out. That'll definitely make life a lot easier. Basically, just gonna pull them right out. Ours are obviously greased. Now we're going to transfer them over. Now when you're transferring these over, you want to make sure that this tab at the top here is facing the front of the vehicle. Slide these into place. Transfer them down, just rotate those downward to get them out of the way. We have to reinstall our factory band clamps to our headers. Now this is what's going to connect your headers, factory manifolds to your X-pipe. So grab these off of your factory exhaust if you haven't done so already. Take note of this little locking tab. You want to make sure that's lining up with a little button welded on the outlet side of your factory manifolds. I'm going to slide this into place. Connecting those two, it seats right in this little pocket. That's how you know it's in the correct position. Do the same thing to the other one. Now when you're installing your X-pipe, you want to make sure it's oriented properly. There's a longer pipe and a shorter pipe. Now the shorter pipe, if you look at your instruction manual, will show that it's on your driver's side. So we want to install that right into those clamps, making sure that that's facing the correct position. All right, grab your 15 socket once this is seated all the way back and tighten down the clamps. Now for the next pipe, we're going to start on our passenger side. You want to make sure you've got your brackets rotated downward. You want to make sure you have a clamp on the inlet side. Slide that over the passenger side of your X pipe. Align it where you need it to be. Tighten down the clamp. Now we're doing the same thing for our driver's side. All right, at this point, you want to rotate those brackets upward and reconnect them to where they should be on the frame. Grab your 13mm deep socket once you put your factory bolts in and tighten them down. All right, now we can install our passenger side muffler. You want to make sure that you're putting a clamp over the end of the pipe. You're also inserting the hanger first into the isolator above the tips, and then line up the pipes. Once you have that seated, rotate your clamp into position and tighten that down. All right, now repeat that for the driver's side. That's going to wrap up my review and install for the Magnaflow Competition Cat-Back Exhaust for the 18 and newer Mustang GT without active exhaust. Check this one out right here at AmericanMuscle.com.